Our scripture reading today comes from John chapter 11. I think the bulletin may say we're going to read 45 verses, but in fact we're only going to read 15. We're going to start with John chapter 11, the 30th verse. Let's see, here we go. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had left him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did put their faith in him. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Today, our technologies fail us left and right. Batteries have gone dead. And the Nook has died. And I am in possession of a copy of an old-fashioned, low-tech, printed version of the sermon. As young women often do, a young woman brought her fiancé home to meet her parents. After dinner, her mother told her father to take the young fella aside and find out more about him. So the father asked the fiancé into his study. "So what are your plans?" said the old man. "Well, I am a biblical scholar," he said. "A biblical scholar? Well, as a biblical scholar, I just have to ask, what do you plan to do to provide a home for my daughter to live in?" The young man said, "I will study, and God will provide." "Well, how will you buy her an engagement ring? Like she deserves to have a nice one, you know." He said, "I will concentrate on my studies, sir, and God will provide." "Well, what do you plan to do about children? I hope to have grandchildren, and they'll be your children and my grandchildren, and what are you going to do to provide for them?" He said, "Don't worry, sir, don't worry. God will provide." Well, the conversation went on like this. Question after question the father asked, and over, the young fellow said, "Don't worry, God will provide." Well, after the daughter and the fiancé had gone elsewhere, the mother asked the father, said, "Well, how'd it go, hon?" And he said to her, "Well, he has no job, no money, no plans, and he thinks I'm gone." All of our lives, we have been taught things like God will provide and God answers prayer. They are both true, you know. God will provide and God does answer prayer. But there are some problems that we have about receiving God's promises. For instance, God has provided us with absolutely enough to eat. We, on the other hand, have made sure that it is illegal to fish with dynamite and hunt after dark. Plenty of food in the woods and in the lake. We just make it illegal to hunt the way God intended. God never said we had to be sporting in order to eat. God said, there it is, kill and eat. We're the ones that make things difficult. God answers prayer too. The harsh reality of the fact that God answers prayer is that no is a legitimate answer to anything we ask God for. If God sees fit to say no, who are we to complain? God knows best. When we come to the story of Lazarus, all 45 verses of it, we see Jesus going to Bethany at the risk of his own life and the risk of his disciples to raise a friend of his, Lazarus, from the dead. Not only was Lazarus his friend, but so were Mary and Martha. And Mary and Martha, they needed Lazarus desperately because apparently, since they lived with their brother, they were unmarried. Because in those days, a woman, in Palestine at least, a woman couldn't own property and she had nothing separate from a man. So if they needed their brother to survive, either their husbands died young or they had never married. So they needed Lazarus in order to survive. And at first glance now, this looks like a wonderful story. It's a story of Jesus' love for his friend. It's a story of Jesus taking great risks for his friends. It's a story of the raw power of God on display in Jesus Christ, doing whatever needs to be done to help the friends of the Lord. It's really, 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 really easy to see that story in that light. But for some people, it's really easy to see this story in a completely different light. It's easy to see when you are the one in mourning. Jesus cared about Lazarus and his sisters. Why didn't he care about me? When my mother or father or sister or brother or spouse died, where was Jesus then? Why would he do a thing like that for them and not for me? Why not? The Gospels record 3 times that Jesus raised somebody from the dead. He raised a little girl. He raised Lazarus, the story we just read. And he raised the son of a widow in a little town called Nain. You know, in 3 years of Jesus' ministry, I'm sure a lot of people in Palestine died. He didn't raise any of the rest of them, just those 3. Jesus healed a lot of sick and demon-possessed and handicapped people too. And I know there were a lot more of them than Jesus healed. Was Jesus playing favorites? What's the deal here? Maybe those were better people. You think? Maybe they had more faith than the ones who weren't healed, raised from the dead. Well, in Scripture, there's no indication that there was anything special about these people. Some of them even had to have other people speak for them, because they didn't have any faith on their own. Somebody else had. So I don't think Jesus was playing favorites at all. In fact, in every single case of a miracle performed by Jesus Christ, 2 things were in play. First, the absolute power of God was put on display for witnesses. Human witnesses saw the power of God at work in the world. And second, Jesus himself was always identified with the power of God on display. But even knowing that the displaying of God's power was the point in these ancient miracles. It's still hard for us when we need a miracle and don't get one, especially when other people seem to get one. You know, we've all known somebody who was sick or had a heart attack or a stroke or run over by a truck or something, and they recovered. And others who were injured, apparently much less severely, died. Or didn't recover, wound up in a nursing home for 30 years or something like that. And some seem to get a miracle and others don't. And we go, why them and not us? Why? The truth remains, though, that miracles then and now are not about the people who receive them. The miracles are about the display of the mighty power of God at work in the world. I can say that with some experience, I can assure you. Back just before my father's 53rd birthday and my 31st birthday, he and I were just beginning to hammer out our relationship as two men and not one father telling a child what to do. We were just beginning to figure that out. And I see plenty of you in here who have figured that out with your own fathers and your own sons. Well, we didn't get to finish figuring that out because before he was 53 and before I was 31, he was gone. He had cancer. We knew for 6 months he was going to die, terminal cancer of the esophagus. I've never known a survivor. And I needed a miracle. I needed it bad. I prayed a lot. And you know what? I got the same unwanted response from God about leaving my father with me that I got from my father when I said, hey, Daddy, can I have a mini bike? The answer was no. Absolutely, unequivocally, ain't no doubt about it, no. Well, I didn't like it the first time, and I didn't like it the second time, but it was still the answer. And I expect in both cases it was probably the right answer. I'm still not sure why either time. Over the next few years, my relationship with God continued to grow, and I came to understand that what was good in God's sight doesn't have to be good in my sight, because God has a much longer view of what's going on than I do. I know one thing. A lot of things happen on God's time schedule that have nothing to do with mine. And I'm sure that if I'm still troubled by stuff like that, when I look Jesus face to face, he'll straighten me out on that. But I have my suspicions that when I'm looking Jesus face to face, why my father died when he was 53 is going to be the least of my concerns, because he's going to be there with me again forever and ever. So I think my concern list will change a lot. When Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, like all the other displays of God's power throughout the Bible, from the burning bush for Moses and the parting of the Red Sea, all those things, every miracle we see is about the power of God. And that amazing power of God that exists is displayed by God over and over and over again to comfort us. They remind us that no matter what things look like or how we think they ought to look or how we think they ought not to look, what things should be or shouldn't be, God knows best, and God can do anything. God has already shown us through a long history of miracles, God can do anything. God can even save sinners like us. You want to see a miracle? That's one.